Hello and welcome to Pluribus Unum's Fireside Chats. Not as good as FDR's, but hey, it's something. Pretty controversial title, am I right, boys? Now, before we get into that, let's just go into a little bit of housekeeping in this video. First, if you notice my voice being a little iffy at some point in this podcast, I have some sort of disease of some kind. I don't know what it is. I just know that there is a ton of stuff in my throat and it hurt a little bit, and that's pretty bad considering the notes I have about this particular podcast shows that it's going to be a pretty long one. If the final product isn't as long as I think it is, then I don't know what the heck happened. So at one point I'm probably going to get it. My voice will probably be fucked up for a while, but it's worth it because I really like this particular subject. I don't want to waste time not doing this subject. And also, housekeeping for those who are recurring viewers who watch my latest video, yes, you are going to be sadly disappointed because for the month of January, I will not be producing any main series edited videos. I will be using the month of January to both, I'll be using the remaining time of this year and basically the entirety of January to do things that are not necessarily mostly writing some of the stuff that I'll be doing for the remainder of the year of 2026, and hopefully I'll be able to get the regular schedule back on track in 2026 due to that fact, because I'll be frank, I don't really have any videos written for next year. I do have. I'll just take a quick check in my notes. Are any of these videos good for next year? No, literally no. One of the videos I have written was supposed to come out this year, and that's the only reason why that's the only one that I have technically written for next year. I was gonna have released it this year, but that didn't end up happening. That specific video will come out on February 12th of 2026. And just to be clear, that will not affect the podcast in any way, I hope. I will probably still be producing the podcast for the remainder of January, just to get the topics of the week down so that you can keep up to date with the news or whatever. But with that out of the way, let's get right into the news. The first news story is coming from Costa Rica. The Costa Rica Congress has blocked efforts to prosecute the president for election interference. Costa Rica's legislature on Tuesday blocked an effort by the country's electoral authority to make President Rodrigo Chavez face charges that he is using his power to meddle in the upcoming elections, because they have elections coming up next year. The specific rule that he is violating is a rule in Costa Rican law that bars him from expressing support due to his policies. Basically, in Costa Rica, if you are president, you are forbidden from speaking about politics. Your job is to govern the country, nothing more. But he's basically being accused of using his platform to express support for his political party in the upcoming election. And they've multiple times tried to impeach him for doing that, and he has said no. The Congress has rejected the ability to do that. Now, would it surprise you guys to know that Rodrigo Chavez is right-wing? So yeah, shock of all shocks, he's like most Latin American right-wing leaders, they basically just going to shift further to the right and just become extremely authoritarian and basically try to rig the elections. Shock of all shocks. Wow, what a concept. It's a completely unheard of thing. Great job, Jaguar. Anyways, staying in Latin America, a new story I haven't talked about a lot because, I'll be real, I've kind of been waiting for the big day, but it seems like a big day is still a little bit away, so I just gotta mention this. Donald Trump has ordered the total and complete blockade of sanctioned oil tankers coming to and leaving Venezuela, so we're ever increasingly more likely to get in a war with Venezuela. Why? Shock of all shocks, oil, literally, at this point the mask is fully coming off, just unequivocally, they're blockading oil tankers I thought this was about drug cartels. Talking about sharks. I don't think drug cartels are on the oil tankers. And then literally Stephen Miller just started posting things like, the oil they have is stolen from us and we must get it back. And it's like, no, it's their oil. You were stealing it from them. They just stopped you from stealing it. And of course, now all of a sudden, much like with El Salvador and when they became public news, and Argentina when they became public news, all of a sudden everybody's now suddenly trying to act like they are an expert in Venezuelan politics, even if they've literally just started paying attention to it 2 minutes ago. And we're seeing so many people everybody's doing everything. Like, on one end, we're seeing lefties who have to say like, oh, we denounced the Maduro and blah, blah, blah. It's like, guys, yeah, we get it. Like, expressing support for the Venezuelan people to not get illegally, invaded by the United States is not endorsing the Maduro regime. I don't like Maduro. I made a Pink Tide Ranking League video. He's on the lower ends of the spectrum. I've criticized him relentlessly. I've expressed support for a person who ran against Maduro in the most recent presidential election in Venezuela. I also believe that the United States should not invade Venezuela. You don't have to add 15 million caveats before you say, hey, this thing that you're doing that's fucked up, it's pretty fucked up. And we're getting, of course, all of those, fake Latin American accounts that all of a sudden are just there's just one page I saw was so fucking stupid. It's literally, it's a person says, the myth of, consensual, invasion. And it shows, Marina Machado saying, I consent. The U.S. saying, I consent. Latin America saying, I consent. Venezuela saying, I consent. And then the words under it are isn't there someone you forgot to ask? And right next to it is a left-wing soy jack saying, I don't. A play on the the myth of consensual sex meme where it's I consent, and then Jesus Christ says, I don't. But it's that meme is just a flat-out lie. Like Marina says yes, USA says yes, Venezuela and Latin America do not say yes. Literally most, if not all, Latin American leaders, I mean, I wouldn't say most, if not all, but it includes Mexico, Brazil, and all the other left-wing Latin American nations who have all basically 100% fully denounced the idea of an invasion. And literally, by virtue of Nicolas Maduro being the government of Venezuela, Venezuela is not demanding for the invasion. And also, literally, all of the evidence shows that even the Venezuelan people, even though they don't like Maduro, they don't want to be invaded by the United States. It's the same lie. It really is a lot of the times just the same lies in Iraq, Vietnam, and whatever. And the problem is, it's just they don't land. None of these lies land for anybody. Even if you do believe in some of the lies, for some, it's not landing. Me, I believe none of the lies that they've said about Venezuela because one, I know what's going on in Venezuela. I know the ins and outs of the situation that is going on in Venezuela because I actually pay attention to the news. But also, I don't fall for the BS because the actions of the administration don't make sense. On one end, Venezuelan immigrants are evil, gross, and terrible, and we need to get rid of them and throw them out of this nation. But on the other end, Venezuela is an evil shithole run by the drug cartels, and we need to go down there and liberate them. Which is it? It can't be both. Either they're good enough to either the nation is well enough for them to be sent back where they came from, or the nation is too bad that we have a moral obligation to keep them in. Literally every single lie, every single thing about, oh, these foreign countries are shitholes, whatever. Every single one of them, I don't believe a single one of them. Because there's, if you truly believe that, you would never want to send them back. You'd never want to send them back because even most of the immigrants that come here literally say, I cannot go back to my nation. If I go back to my nation, I will die. I will be murdered by this cartel. I am fleeing this cartel. And then literally just haha, bye-bye. It's well, great. You really don't give a shit. Because, yes, they don't care. They don't care about the drug cartels. Donald Trump literally pardoned a drug trafficker. 2 of them, in fact. And one of them was a Latin American drug trafficker. It's just insane. I don't understand how... literally, if you just pay attention to a single thing that is happening, then you just can't buy into what's going on. We're literally hearing the exact same lies. Fentanyl is now considered a weapon of mass destruction, literally to goad people into thinking that we need to go in there to stop the fentanyl from coming into America, even though it's wait, but I thought fentanyl was a drug that was just common in America, and it just kept going out of the American hospitals. Shh, no. You see, the fentanyl is actually secretly being infiltrated by all these low, it's the fentanyl trade literally has basically nothing to do with Latin America at all. That's not how fentanyl gets in the country at all. It's a pharmaceutical drug. What are you talking about? Like, for real, there's not much I can really say on this, because it's just like, unequivocally just hands off Venezuela. Hands off Venezuela. No war with Venezuela. No war with Venezuela. If there is a war in Venezuela, we will lose. And now, there's some people who will say that, because they said this about, like, Iraq, Vietnam, and other wars, and it's just like, oh, but we won Iraq, because that's another thing. It's like they're pulling the same lines, like, we'll be greeted as liberators, we will save these nations, and the people of Venezuela will be happy that we did so. It's like, no, they won't, because we're not going to do anything good for them. We're going to take over their country, and we're going to steal their oil. Literally, we will dig up all their resources, steal everything of them, and then once we're done with them, we'll throw them in the trash, and then they'll just all die. That's what's going to happen. That's what happened with Iraq. That's what happened with Libya. That's what happened with all these other nations that we've invaded and, quote-unquote, won. And even if we win, and this is the thing. I don't even believe it will win. I literally, because some people are trying to be like, oh, but, no, we'll win. Because that's the mentality they have, like, oh, but it's like Venezuela. Come on. We can win. We can easily beat Venezuela. We can easily beat Iran. We can easily beat all these countries. It's like, no, we can't. Because the fact of the matter is, we can't. There's a reason why we can't. Because, there's a reason why we were able to, quote-unquote, win in Iraq and we weren't able to win in Vietnam. It's because the people of Vietnam, they actually had something to fight for. The people of Iraq didn't have something to fight for. They didn't like Saddam Hussein. Whether it be an ideological reason to fight or whatever reason, whether it be ideological or otherwise, there's a reason for them to fight. In Venezuela, they are literally, hardcore left-wing socialists. I think, if I remember correctly, there was, a vote in the Venezuelan, assembly that, all the parties, even the ones that don't like Chavez, they unilaterally voted to be against this invasion. And in a conflict with Iran is, of course, basing their belief system on, God. So, of course, if we went into war with them, they're going to fight because they think that they are just fighting God. And that could also be a similar reason why the Venezuelans might fight. Because, they literally believe that Hugo Chavez is, a religious figure to an extent. So that could easily be used as fervor for fuel to lead a fight. The biggest ultimate battle is, I think it would be what is Maduro? And the fact of the matter is, it seems like Maduro, whether you like him or hate him, he's at least somewhat a true believer. Because it appears Maduro has been given multiple opportunities to just leave and save himself, but he has chosen not to, and it's just bruh, that just kind of shows yeah, if we go to war with these people, we're effed. We're effed. We're effed. Are they gonna make gains? No, obviously not. But we're just gonna be spending tons of money on a war that's just not gonna do anything for us. And speaking of not doing anything for us, why don't we continue talking about Donald Trump? Because Donald Trump made a speech that I thought was going to be the announcement of a war with Venezuela. Everyone seemed to think that, but it was just it was basically just him sitting there for a couple of minutes jerking himself off, and everyone was just and if you like the idea of Donald Trump jerking himself off, you love that speech, and if you don't like that idea, you didn't like that speech. I know from my personal experience, I had family members who were quote-unquote MAGA that every time he said anything, they're just yeah, that's true, yes, 100%. And meanwhile, since I knew the actual things he was talking about, I basically was laughing the entire time. Literally just the peace ceasefire in Gaza, and it's just bro, what ceasefire? Israel's violated it 184 times. I ended 8 wars. No, you didn't. The economy has gotten better. No, it hasn't. But one big thing that I didn't know about, which is just fucking insane. So during the speech, one of the big things, because next year is going to be the anniversary of I think it's the 150th anniversary of America, and as a special way to be wow, cool, we're so amazing, Donald Trump has announced that he's going to be giving a stipend check of $1,776 to all of the American soldiers, or at the very least 1,450,000 of them, known as the Warrior Dividend, that's going to be coming before Christmas. And quote unquote, it's they're already on their way. Making this big spiel about oh, no one deserves this money more than our troops, and also bringing up the the numbers of the people in the military are rising so much. They were dropping under Joe Biden, and they're rising with us. It's that's not a good thing. People, you do know that number is not a good thing, right? In America, the reason why people join the military is because they want the financial benefits for joining the military. They want that free college. They want like a paycheck. They want financial stability. They want student loan payments. That's what they want. I have friends who joined the military exclusively because like they had no interest in serving in the military, but they knew like they were gonna get free college from it. But apparently this is way worse, because I thought it was just like a stupid, like he's just pulling money out of his ass and just like whatever. But it turns out it's way worse, because apparently this specific thing was actually intended to be a completely different policy. Like, it was apparently a $2.9 billion fund that was going to go into giving soldiers housing in America. Like, that was a plan that was already put in place, and then he destroyed that entire plan and is now doing this stipend. And this is where it gets worse, because there are two elements of this that get worse. One, apparently Donald Trump cut money from that funding, because apparently, like, Pete Hegseth revealed that the actual amount that they're going to be sending off is $2.6 billion, which leaves $300 million unaccounted for. But then, here's the thing, you do the math, 2.6 billion divided by 1,450,000 soldiers, and that's supposed to be like roughly around $1,793. But that's weird. That's not the amount the stipend has. Why is that? Well, it turns out, whereas the original like stimulus policy for the housing was not like no taxes were going to be on it, this stipend, the warrior dividend, is going to be taxed. While literally during that exact same speech, he was going around I lowered all these taxes, I lowered these taxes, I lowered this tax. It's just like, yeah, literally she's like, if you actually pay attention to anything that he says, that he does, then it's just like, bro, it's just, how can anyone buy any of the nonsense he says? The only way you can do it is if you just don't read anything. And let's just take a little bit of a pause on Donald Trump and shift towards one of his lackeys, Pam Bondi, just to do a quick little vibe check and see what's going on with her. So Pam Bondi has announced that she wants the FBI to place cash bounties on trans activists. Interesting development. The Trump administration's chief legal advisor instructed the U.S. security services to create a cash reward system incentivizing members of the public to share information on what the attorney's office described as domestic terrorist groups. These groups, according to Bondi, include groups or individuals promoting so-called radical gender identity and hostility towards traditional values of family, religion, and morality. The leaked memo, issued on the 5th of December, argues the strategy would lead to a successful identification and arrest of relevant individuals and groups. With this directly being a relevant case in referencing the NSPM7, basically how they the government is basically shifting all these words and going around and be oh, these guys are actual radical terrorist groups, and it's literally it's just the groups that they say are terrorists are trans people and atheists. It's ooh, oh no. Now, there is a lot I could say on this, but I think really the biggest thing that boils down to is that, you know what? I'm starting to really understand that whole under no pretext line. I'm starting to understand its value. Trans people specifically, that Second Amendment out there, you guys probably should, we live in America, so, we live in the place where, a well-regulated militia is needed to protect the state, and the right for the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So I'm just saying, that's just the law of the land. We're just following the law of the land, my boys and girls and non-binary pals. You guys have the right to follow laws. You guys have the right to follow laws. It's clearly something that the Trump administration is not doing, because Pam Bondi and the Trump administration broke the law on the day I'm recording this, which is the day that they were supposed to release the Jeffrey Epstein files, and sure enough, they did not. Well, basically, here's what happened. So first, they announced that they would not be reaching the deadline. The Trump administration basically announced just fully, we will not release the files on the deadline. And then Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie said, you have to. That's the law. That's literally the act in Congress that we have pushed into law. If you do not, you guys are going to have to face legal repercussions for that. And so, now, they have started to release some tiny little semblances of the files that they can. And I mean it. Like, literally, there are multiple pages of the files. Like, I think literally there's like one section where it's like 100 pages are completely blank. The searchable database didn't work for a decent bit of time. And there are multiple people's names and faces that are covered, even if they're not supposed to be. Because, literally, according to the rules, the only people that they are allowed to cover up in these documents are the names and faces of the victims of Jeffrey Epstein. That's it. But magically, randomly, a ton of adult men keep getting their faces masked and keep getting their names masked. It'll literally be like, this person met with Jeffrey Epstein. He was well known for being part of this blah 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 group chat about talking about girls. His name was blank. And we're seeing the same things over and over and over again. Right-wingers keep bringing up like, oh, but Bill Clinton. It's like, guys, I just gotta be real. You do know that a majority of the people who are talking about the Jeffrey Epstein files release were not alive when Bill Clinton was president, right? Like, I mean, guys, me personally, I literally just started existing like the year Bill Clinton left office. Or I guess technically he left office in 2001. So I was like a couple months old when he left office, but you get my point. Like, he is literally nothing to us. He means literally nothing to us. In fact, a majority of the people on the left who are advocating for the release of the Jeffrey Epstein files are literally like socialists and communists. Like, you guys know this, right? But again, these guys believe like somehow like, oh, all the Democrats are communists, and they basically, it's the same thing. Like, they shift all their, like, they sycophantically support Trump, so they think that everybody else does the same thing that they do, but for the other side. And most people have pointed out, like, you know, again, it's like, it's the meme that some people have been saying over and over and over again, like, you know, what's going to happen is that magically most of the Republican names and most of the Republican faces are going to be magically deleted from the documents, or not even, like, I mean, they're not even deleted, they're just censored. Because I think it's literally just they are not allowed to. I guess it's literally just the precedent that they can't do. They can't actually delete them for some reason. I mean, I guess for some reason, I guess that's a good thing, but, like, they just not doing a good job doing a cover-up.
Hello there, Esor the Rose here. I do not usually interrupt the podcast, but there's some things that do make me feel like I gotta pop in and add something. First is mentioning how some of the EPSTEIN files do not show in the results. For example, it will have file 163, 164, 166, and 168. But notice how 165 and 167 are not there? But also the few EPSTEIN files that did show Donald Trump now magically have disappeared the day after they were in the initial drop. Curious, isn't it? Now back to Pluribus Unum's regularly scheduled video. It's
literally the jerking around that we have been seeing over and over and over again. And it's also just weird, because, like, Republicans are just kind of just showing their faces again. Like there's this one, like, right-wing Twitter account that literally posted a picture of, like, one of the Epstein victims who's, like, they're wearing, like, footsie pajamas. They're, like, and they're, like, their face is censored, obviously. But then he's just like, this isn't fun. Like, the tweet, like, the tweet is literally just like, this isn't fun. It's like, everyone in the comments is, like, roasting them, but, like, wait, what made you think that the release of the notorious child sex traffickers documents was going to be fun? And it's because, like, they all literally thought that it was just going to be, like, Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden. It's like, and it's like, wow, even figures that it just, bro, I literally saw a photo in the Epstein files that of the few that were released. Literally, it says, like, blank's name couldn't come today because she was at soccer practice. It's just like, bro, what made you think this was gonna be fun? Yeah, it's because you guys don't fucking care. It's the same thing, like, with the Joe Biden memes. Like, because, like, Joe Biden's, like, daughter's diary was leaked. And then, like, the diary had, like, some slightly sus statements that weren't even related to Joe Biden necessarily. Like, it was basically, like, I don't really want to get into it. I mean, I guess I could say it in a comment because I don't want to ramble. I want it to be, like, written in a comment, so it's like I could actually articulate my points on it, like, more accurately if I do. But, like, the point is, like, there was some slightly, like, weird things that she said about her, like, upbringing that she was like, I kind of got this weird vibe from my upbringing. Nothing of it implicated, like, wrongdoing on Biden's part, but every single conservative was, like, bringing that out and be like, oh, but Joe Biden. Meanwhile, it's literally just like Donald Trump has like literal correspondence with Epstein, and somehow you guys miss that part. It's because they don't care. They legitimately don't care. What they like push on left-wingers and Democrats about Bill Clinton and stuff are what they actually feel about Trump. They genuinely don't care if Donald Trump raped children. They don't care. They don't fucking care. If they did, they wouldn't have voted for him. These accusations have literally been around since Trump's first election campaign. The first thing that came out of the controversies of Donald Trump's election campaign was that he fucked 12-year-old girls. That was the first thing that came out. And they didn't care. They didn't care. And they don't care that they've been lied to about this for so long. They've literally lived in an alternate reality where they convince themselves that not only is Donald Trump somehow not implicated in the fact that his best friend was a fucking child sex trafficker and that he met with him multiple times, he submitted letters to him multiple times, there were multiple accusations about him by Epstein victims, and they somehow convinced themselves that it's just completely irrelevant. And that somehow all the blame about Epstein is like on Bill Clinton and all these other people. I mean, this is most sense. Like, there are literal videos of Trump supporters being interviewed about Donald Trump's sex crimes back in 2016, and they literally said that they were okay with it because back then he was a Democrat. Now he's a good guy. He did all the bad things back when he was a Democrat. Now, since he's one of us, he's repenting for his sins. And I just want to show another element. I just want to tell you a story about another element of the Epstein files thing that shows just how skewed and fucked up this situation is. Okay, so one of the pictures that was released of the Epstein files was a picture of Michael Jackson and Bill Clinton surrounded by multiple children with their faces covered up. And clearly that picture is meant to give off a particular vibe. You know, Michael Jackson, the guy who's been accused of child sex crimes in the past, and Bill Clinton standing next to a picture, those two being in the files of one of the most notorious child sex traffickers in the modern day, being surrounded by children whose faces are covered. And remember, we're only supposed to cover the faces of the victims, so clearly it's giving off a vibe. Except one big problem: that photo is readily available to the public, and the photo in question is Michael Jackson and Bill Clinton meeting, standing next to Michael Jackson's own children. Those children whose faces are covered up are not victims of Jeffrey Epstein. They were Michael Jackson's children. Now, why is that picture in the Epstein files? Well, it's because that was a time when they met Jeffrey Epstein. Literally, it's an event that was a concert that Michael Jackson did, and Jeffrey Epstein was in the concert, and then Michael Jackson talked to him for a little bit, and they had a photo up with Bill Clinton at one point. So yeah, of course that ends up in the fucking files because it's all of Jeffrey Epstein's files. And it's the thing, again, it's the thing, because, some conservatives still try to do the same bullshit again. It's why didn't Biden release the Epstein files? And even a Kamala Harris interview came out, and it's just I don't understand why. She even said, something that's so stupid. It's why are you saying this? Because this is why the Biden administration didn't release the Epstein files. It's because they were investigating the Epstein files. That was the whole point of them being in the FBI vault in the first place. The FBI was looking at the files and trying to figure out who was there for the business side of things and who was there for the pleasure side of things. That was the whole point of the fucking Epstein files investigation. It wasn't until the Trump people came in and said, "Oh, we're not gonna do this investigation anymore. We're going to release all the files immediately." You guys are the ones who said this, by the way. You guys are the ones who claimed this. It's sure, go ahead, let's do it. And you guys thought the Democrats were gonna be "No, stop! How dare you!" But it's they're "No, go ahead." And it's and now all of a sudden they're in this big hole. I just gotta be completely real. Literally, I just gotta say this. I actually need to give props to Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, and Dan Bongnigo, or whatever his name is. Those three are legitimately the reason why I 100%, without a shadow of a doubt, believe Donald Trump is a pedophile. Before all this stuff, I was 50-50 technically, or I guess maybe more 60-40 because, all those previous allegations that were either half related to Epstein or not even necessarily completely related to Epstein. But the reaction that those three specifically did, those three specifically, their response to this, their response and their actions on this case specifically are 100% verifiably more, like, they have proven it way more than literal files could have. Because again, all three of them came into office saying the same thing, like, Donald Trump's the most amazing man in the world. We're going to stop the Epstein. We're going to release the Epstein files. We're going to put these criminals accountable. We're going to make sure that all these guys who've done evil, heinous acts to children, we're going to hold them accountable. They both held the belief that Donald Trump was the greatest man in the world and he was a leading vanguard, and then also that they need to release every single Epstein file and prosecute every single person who even stepped foot in the same store as Epstein. And then magically, all three of them get into the time, like, they say all this without having read a single file on Jeffrey Epstein. Then all three of them get put in a position where they literally have to read every single Epstein file. And now, magically, one of them quits, one of them drops the charges, and one of them spends all of his time saying, I don't want to talk about the Epstein case anymore. Literally. There is literally no other conclusion that I could come to that makes it go like, you all of a sudden don't want to release the files anymore. Because these guys know their careers are cooked. Like, their careers are fucking cooked. Every single person who has had a public forum and expressed support for Donald Trump, your lives are cooked in the most honest sense. Because literally, it doesn't matter what happens next. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if he releases the files, if he doesn't release the files. It doesn't matter. It's over. If they didn't believe Trump was a pedophile before, they 100% believe it now. Because again, there is no other explanation you can come to. There is literally not a single other explanation you can come to as to why these files are not immediately released. Unless he is in it. There's no other way you can look at this situation. And again, it's just like, what? Like, I mean, what? And, like, this is the thing. This is even this is the biggest thing. Because I mean, I don't know what's happening next, but like, because again, like, the DOJ is now trying to lie again. Like, oh, the initial deadline's been met. No, there is no initial deadline. This was the final deadline. This was it. You're supposed to release everything today. Everything. Everything was supposed to come out today. There's not supposed to be a wait for anything else. There's supposed to be no reactions aside from names and, faces of victims. That's it. Nothing else. And due to that fact, allegedly, Thomas Massie, Marjorie Taylor Greene, are allegedly going to start just reading the names. Like, they've allegedly going to start going to the Epstein victims just saying, okay, give us the names. Give us the names of the people who raped you. And now they're just going to read them publicly. And this is the fun part. They can't get killed. These guys are strapped every day. It's just like, and Ro Khanna basically just announced, like, him and Thomas Massie are now pushing for articles of impeachment against Pam Bondi. It's like, yeah. And then Massie even went so far as to say, like, guys, just so you know, since this administration has broken a law that Congress passed, this isn't like, because like this, he pointedly said, like, this is not a subpoena. This was not a subpoena. This was a demand from Congress. So, due to that fact, anybody can try this administration for failing to do their job. Like, literally, there's only two outcomes to this situation. Massive Democrat wave in the next elections, or Donald Trump tries to do a second coup. Like, literally, those are the only two outcomes left in this situation. Anyways, let's move on to the last news story, and it's about Section 230, and why you guys should be focusing on trying to make sure that Section 230 does not die. Because, this is the thing, Dick Durbin and Lindsey Graham have introduced a bill to repeal Section 230, and it's a bipartisan bill, and it has gotten the support of Chuck Grassley, Sheldon Whitehouse, Josh Hawley, Amy Klobuchar, Marsha Blackburn, Richard Blumenthal, Ashley Moody, and Peter Welch. And it's with a heavy heart that I officially announce that I am canceling Peter Welch. Fuck you, Peter Welch. You are a disgrace to your state, and I hope that whoever primaries you beats you by a massive margin. Now, why is Section 230 so important? Well, this is specifically Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, which was passed in the 90s, which was one of the earliest internet bills, if I remember correctly. And, to tell you why it's so important, let's just read it. I'm just going to read you the entirety of Section 230. The Congress finds the following: the rapidly developing array of internet and other interactive computer services available to individual Americans represents an extraordinary advance in the availability of educational and informational resources for our citizens. These services offer users a great access of control over the information that they receive, as well as the potential for even greater control in the future as technology develops. The internet and other interactive computer systems offer a forum for true diversity of political discourse, unique opportunities for cultural development, and a myriad of avenues of intellectual activity. The internet and other interactive computer services have flourished to the benefit of all Americans with minimum of government regulation. Increasingly, Americans are relying to interactive media for a variety of political, educational, cultural, and entertainment services. It is policy that the U.S. to promote the continued development of the internet and interactive computer services and other interactive media to preserve the vibrant and competitive free market that presently exists in the internet and other interactive computer services, unfettered by federal or state regulations. 3, to encourage the development of technologies which maximize user control over what information is received by individuals, families, and schools who use the internet and other interactive computer services. 4, to remove disincentives for the development of utilization of blocking and filtering technologies and that empower parents to restrict their children's access to objectionable or inappropriate online material. And 5, to ensure vigorous enforcement of federal criminal laws to deter punishing trafficking in obscenity, stalking, and harassment by means of computer. C, protection for Good Samaritan blocking and screening of offensive material. 1, treatment of publisher and speaker. No provider or user of an interactive service shall be treated as the publisher or speaker of any information provided by another information content provider. 2, civil liability. No provider, user of an interactive computer services shall be held liable on account of A, any action voluntarily taken in good faith to restrict access to or ability of material that the provider or user considers to be obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessively violent, harassing, or otherwise objectionable, whether or not such material is constitutionally protected, or B, any action taken to enable or make available to information content providers or others the technological means to restrict access of material based on in paragraph 1. Obligations of interactive computer service. A provider of interactive computer service shall, at the time of entering an agreement with a customer for the provision of interactive computer service and in a manner deemed appropriate by the provider, notify such customer that parental controls protections such as computer hardware, software, or filtering services are commercially available that may assist the customer in limiting access to material that is harmful to minors. Such notice shall identify or provide the customer with access to information identifying current providers of such protections. E, effect on other laws. No effect on criminal law. Nothing in this section shall be construed to impair the enforcement of Section 223 or 231 of this title, Chapter 71, relating to obscenity, or 11, relating to sexual exploitation of children of Title 18, or any other federal criminal statute. 2, no effect on intellectual property law. Nothing in this section shall be construed to limit or expand any law pertaining to intellectual property. 3, state law. Nothing in this section shall be construed to prevent any state from enforcing any state law that is consistent with this section. No case of action may be brought and no liability may be imposed under any state or local law that is inconsistent with selection. 4, no effect on communications privacy law. Nothing in this section shall be construed to limit the application of the Electronic Communications Privacy Act of 1986 or any of the amendments made by such act or any similar state law. 5, no effect on the sex trafficking law. Nothing in this section, other than subsection C2A, shall be construed to impair or limit any claim in a civil action brought under section 1595 of Title 18 if the conduct underlying claim constitutes a violation of section 1591 of that title. B, any such criminal prosecution brought under state law if the conduct is underlying the charge which would constitute a violation of section 1591 of Title 18, or any charge in a criminal prosecution brought under state law if the conduct underlying the charge would constitute a violation of section 2421A of Title 18, and promotion or facilitation of prostitution is illegal in the jurisdiction where the defendant's promotion or facilitation of prostitution was targeted. The remaining part is just definitions of terms to those who might not know. I'll include this particular section in the description so that you can read it for yourself. But for a TLDR, it basically says, basically the main important thing about section 230 is that internet service providers, or people who make websites, they are not held responsible for anything that is, they're not held, I wouldn't say necessarily they're not held responsible for anything on the site, but they are not necessarily held to the standard, they are not, YouTube is not responsible for my content, essentially. So if someone has a problem with my content, YouTube can't get sued for putting my content on their website. like their service is essentially like if like basically as it says, like unless I'm breaking the law, they got nothing on me. Like there's nothing against the content that is made on YouTube or any other website. As long as it doesn't break the law, it's perfectly fine. But there's a bunch of these stupid old people senators who are basically going around saying like, oh well now we gotta do really hard. We gotta push really hard for Section 230 to be repealed, specifically so that quote unquote giant social media platforms can be finally held accountable for their actions. Like as Lindsey Graham, I think, said, it's like, it's past time to allow those who've been harmed by these behemoths to have their day in court. Basically, like, they do it for different reasons. Like I mean, well, allegedly, there's a lot of different reasons. Like, basically, the way that they would pitch it to liberals is, of course, like, you know, like, social media sites have led to a lot of bad things, like, you know, harassment of girls and blah, 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 that kind of stuff. That's sad. Don't you want them to be able to be fixing themselves? Right-wingers want to hold them accountable for, like, you know, the quote-unquote censorship of conservatives or whatever. But, I don't really, but one big thing that a lot of people pointed out is, like, this happens right around the same time that Hillary Clinton announced it, like, basically says, like, she social media sites are, like, the same reason why, like, Mitt Romney and all those other people were like, oh, well, like, the new age of the new age of social media, like, a lot of people are pro-Palestinian now, so clearly it's these social media sites that are trying to, like, brainwash our children. So, like, clearly that seems to be one of the main reasons, like, and shock all shocks, this is a stupid idea, and, you know, I think we should do everything in our power to prevent this from passing. I'm not sure if it will, because I don't know. I don't know if it will or not. They claim they have this bipartisan support, but it's like, I don't see that. There aren't that many senators who are backing this bill at this particular moment. I'm pretty sure there are a lot more that probably might or might not. Hopefully this will turn into another SOPA battle where it's just like everyone thinks it's a rubber stamp bill and then this bill just dies because too many people like get out of control. There's like a 15 million other like fucking bills. Like there's not 15 million, but like there's like 5 more other bills that they're trying to do to try and push towards like internet like regulation and stuff. And you know, they have varying degrees of like popularity or unpopularity, and they're all ultimately trying to go with the same goal of trying to censor the internet. But on the bright side, at least we have some people who are still going to be on board to try and fight it. And like apparently, like this is a big one. This is funny. Ron Wyden, who was again one of the big figures in the SOPA PIPA battle back in the day, he is leading he's going to be leading the charge, like he's leading the big charge to like try and prevent this like stuff. He's apparently been like trying to lead this fight for a while, because like this has been a thing that's been rumbling for a while, but he's like been like, hey, this is a big idea that we should stop. Like, we should stop this. This is bad. And one of the big things that's funny is that Ron Wyden himself is actually the writer of Section 230. He wrote that bill into law. So it's like, yeah, I mean, good on you, Ron. At least you're doing some good. Anyways, I did not know that it would take that long. So let's move on to the main topic of this video. I don't know if how popular or how well known this factoid about me is on this channel at this point. You know, especially considering, like, you know, some of you are newer or whatever. I don't necessarily talk about it that much. I talk about it in like I wouldn't say that I've never talked about it, but I've talked about it a decent bit. Like, I've talked about it just enough that I'm pretty sure that you guys probably would know, but not enough. Like, I mean, I don't know if I've talked about it enough that all of you would know, or I don't know. Maybe it's just the vibe I get or whatever. But like, regardless, for those who don't know, and for those who do, let's just reiterate this statement again. The man behind the channel of Pluribus Unum is, in fact, a raging atheist. That's right. I do not believe in any sort of god or spiritual mumbo-jumbo in the world. I don't believe in any of that. I believe in science, and science doesn't really seem to have any room for any of that stuff. I've technically been one since I was 11. I say technically because from like around 11 to like 14 or 15, I identified myself with the term agnostic, you know, which technically I still am, because for those who don't know, the term agnostic basically just means you don't know if there is a god, but that's the difference between like atheist and agnostic. Those are two different terms that separated the two different meanings. Like, If you are an atheist, you do not believe in a God. If you are an agnostic, you don't know if there's a God. And if everybody is an agnostic. No one is a Gnostic. Well, I guess technically if you are of the religious belief of the Gnostics, or like that specific Gnostic sect, then yes, you would be an agnostic. But like, you get my point. The term Gnostic means you know, but the term agnostic means you don't know. And I basically that was basically the conclusion I came to back during that time. I'm like, oh yeah, so I guess technically, I'm just an atheist. But even then, even then as an agnostic, I still even as a quote unquote agnostic, I still did basically a ton of atheist stuff. I watched the Skeptic Community, the Amazing Atheist, Cult of Dusty, Armored Skeptic, Dark Matter 2545, which is still a good channel, by the way. The last one, Dark Matter 2545, still pretty good channel. I watched Richard Dawkins clips every day. Well, not every day, but Hitch slaps, religion debates or whatever, secular talk, made memes about oh, God sucks, God is so gay, that kind of stuff, Pendulette quotes about atheism. And I would also be described as I also kind of describe myself and be described as an anti-theist. I not only believe that religion is wrong or not real, but I also believe that it has really done a lot more harm to our society than good, and it would probably be in the best interest of everybody if we just got rid of it and moved forward with the future. Basically a go touch grass mentality, but for religion. There are a multitude of different reasons why I came to those conclusions, but I think ultimately the main crux of it is, as I mentioned earlier, a lack of evidence. Just reading any of the extremely bold claims in any of the major religious texts and seeing how that's just not true just doesn't add up. I try to base my thinking on everything based on some form of evidence to back it up. That's why I trust and believe most scientific consensus, because there's actual studies that are done to prove these things. Why is evolution real, and why is it not anything else? Well, because here's a study that we did that shows how evolution works, and here's this other study that confirms it, and here's this other study that proves this. Why is the Earth round? Well, here's this photographic evidence of the Earth being round. Here's video evidence of us swirling around the Earth. You literally look and see the curvature of the Earth just by going outside and seeing it for yourself. It's a mentality that I maintain throughout most things in my life. I'm not a socialist just because I think it's fun. Because I look to the evidence and think that a socialist system is probably the best way we can run society. And it's a similar thing with capitalism. Back up your claims that capitalism is this ultimately inevitable good with evidence, and then I don't see the evidence. Religion was given that same task. I said prove your religious whatevers with evidence. And sure enough, that evidence never came. You guys are the ones who want to make extraordinary claims about a man walking on water, a man flying into heaven on a Pegasus, a giant boat that flooded the earth. Prove it. Just prove it. And you can't do that. For some reason, you can't do that. I'm told to rely on this so-called faith that it happened and not actual any form of evidence. And you're stuck in your beliefs that you cannot even fathom the possibility that you're wrong, as evidenced by the Ken Ham and Bill Nye debate on Noah's Ark. Literally, they did a debate on Noah's Ark. And Ken Ham is a religious fundamentalist who basically would argue Noah's Ark is real, the Bible's 100% factual, blah, blah, blah. And Bill Nye was no, science is real. And literally, there was one point, I don't know if this was the closing argument or whatever, but it was at one point where they just asked a very simple question to both of the debaters. What would convince you of the other person's argument? Bill Nye said, any evidence. Ken Ham said, nothing. And that's the ultimate thing. That Ken Ham and millions of people around the world just like him are so willing to stand so more core to their belief system that based on nothing, and they don't want to engage with the possibility that they're wrong. I engage with the possibility that I'm wrong all the time. I always think about the possibility that I'm wrong on anything. I literally just did a video where I talked about how I was wrong on certain things. Even though I thought one thing, I was proven wrong. I don't sit there and cry about it. I adapt and move forward. And again, it's not just Christianity, because I know what some people are going to say. Well, you're only talking about Christianity. Yeah, I'm talking about Christianity because this episode is going to come out like a couple days before Christmas. That's why I'm talking about Christianity. And also, we live in the United States, which is governed and majority Christian. So, yes, of course, I'm going to talk about the religion that is the dominant force in my life and the lives of a lot of people. And I might say, dominant force in your life, is you a Christian? No, I'm not a Christian. That's another part of the problem. I'm not a Christian, and yet somehow every other Christian doesn't like that. They don't like that. They don't like that I'm not a Christian. They think that I have to be governed by Christian laws. That I have to be governed by Christian rules. They think I have to be governed by that. Look, you want, like Christians, you want to take time out of your day to, like, right before you go night-night, say magic words to your sky daddy before you go night-night. Whatever. You want to say magic words before you eat food? Sure, go ahead, do that. But if you're going to sit there and be like, no, you have to put down your fork and you have to pray with us. It's like, no, fuck you. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. Fuck you. You don't want to fuck men because your magic book says you don't? Fine. Go ahead. You're lost, buddy. But when you start going around and be like, no. Nobody can fuck men. Men cannot fuck men. If you're a man and you want to fuck a man, no, you can't do that. You have to fuck a woman. It's like, no. Who says so? But my magic book says, no, your magic book means nothing to me. It means nothing to me and it means nothing to nobody. Funny, your book also says that you're not allowed to eat crayfish, so why are you eating a crayfish? Well, I mean, that part's a little unreasonable. Interesting that you're able to do certain rules. You're able to... Also, it says that you can't, like, rich people don't deserve to go to heaven, but yet you're being rich. Interesting. Interesting that all the pastors that seem to be saying, like, that seem to literally preach, like, a camel is more likely to go through the eye of a needle than to get into heaven. Meanwhile, all these mega pastors literally, like, make millions of dollars, because that's ultimately what religion is. It's just a way for the rich to get money, and for society to stay the way it is. It is the opium of the masses. And my natural skepticism in regards to religion and religiosity and all this other stuff has led to me to become a little bit skeptical of one other aspect of religion. And it's very controversial. It's one that I've looked at and dabbled with a little bit, but I haven't really done much prior research into it. I did like a little bit of like tertiary glances here and there about it. It is something known as the Christ myth theory, a theory that Jesus H. Christ never existed. And now, I don't just mean like, rejecting Jesus Christ walking on water, rejecting Jesus Christ, turning water into wine, rejecting him feeding a town of like millions with 2 fishes, but it's rejecting he did not exist at all, like nothing. He didn't get crucified by Pontius Pilate. He wasn't died. He wasn't crucified. Wasn't buried. None of it happened. Not a single one. Which is a little bit of a difference in, sort of some eras of historical narratives, and because a lot of historians generally accept the theory of like, well, okay, maybe the heaven part wasn't real, maybe the fish part wasn't real, maybe the water part wasn't real. But they generally accept, like, the idea that a person named Jesus, who was a prophet of a religion that would inevitably become Christianity, was crucified by the Romans for speaking out about his belief system and causing disruption in Rome. That's the general accepted belief system. Now, a lot more people generally believe in, the fake stuff, too, but, that's not, the main historical narrative. But also, that they consider the Jesus Christ, the Jesus myth theory, a, fringe historical theory that really shouldn't be looked at with any sort of, real, meaning. Which, to me, doesn't really seem fair. Even as I, sometimes did, I'll just be real, I kind of dabbled here and there about the Jesus myth theory. I kind of flip-flopped on what my position was on it. But I think it'll get more evident as the episode goes on. But basically, I was kind of at most, I was kind of, I would say it just to be, an edgelord atheist, oh, Jesus Christ wasn't even real. There were some elements I got, but I didn't really do much research into the theory because, I guess that'll also be a topic that'll be relevant a little bit later in the video because Some of the belief systems that I had prior, I still kind of hold, but some of the stuff that I had, I kind of changed, and as this episode will go on, hopefully it'll explain a little bit better. But the one thing I really did, think of was, I genuinely didn't really like the idea that this theory was just flat out dismissed outright. But I kind of brushed off as maybe I'm just I just don't know the reasons why it's brushed off so easily. Maybe if I do research into it, maybe it'll be a bit more evident. But I've done some slight research here and there on it, and it just didn't make sense to me why it was so brushed off so easily. And then, in preparation for this episode to come out, I did a decent number of more research into the theory, and I'm here to say, maybe its fringe status is way more undeserving than it should be. And let's get into some of the reasons why. First, let's just go over some of the most prevalent aspect of it that is kind of obvious since day one, that literally, this part was just automatically I knew this before going into anything, doing any further research into it, really. And that is the fact that there is not a single piece of evidence that Jesus Christ existed during his lifetime. Not a one. Nothing. First of all, the biggest thing that is considered the evidence of Jesus Christ's existence is, of course, the Bible. The purported biography of his life that exists is the Bible. That is what is alleged. That's where the story of Jesus Christ started. That's when it first was published. Even that wasn't written during his lifetime. It was written at least half a century after he died. And even if we were to accept that as truth, the Bible is not a historical document. There is no author we can cite. It has no basis in reality. There are too many contradictions within itself to be reliable. And again, that's just the Bible. That's just the Bible. The other outside of the Bible, there's no archaeological data that shows existence. There's no bones. There's no independent historical documents that say his existence of his lifetime. Nothing. Literally, there is nothing. Nothing is there. But historians don't deny he exists. I mean, okay, cool. But they haven't proved he exists either. Literally, I kept always looking into it, but where's the evidence of his existence? Where's the evidence of Jesus Christ's existence? Where is it? I was waiting desperately for the historians who kept saying the Jesus Christ myth theory, we should just throw that away because, it's obvious Jesus Christ is real, but it's where's the evidence of it? I'm not seeing it. I can't find them saying a single thing that backs up the claim that Jesus Christ was real. They just say it as if it's just an automatic fact. It literally seems like they're going backwards. The Bible is there. Everyone believes it, so they have to say Jesus Christ is real, or else they're going to face repercussions for it. Other historical figures have some form of evidence of their existence, correspondence with other historical figures, photos or videos if they're from that era. Various sometimes they're actual bodies in graves. How do we know George Washington is real? Well, we have his grave and we can DNA test it. Meanwhile, the historical evidence for Jesus Christ is, at best, spotty. Sometimes it's due to differing interpretations, the Roman historian Suetonius possibly referring to Jesus in a passage of one of his history texts, and sometimes it's because there are literally missing sections of history because, again, this happened so long ago. Listen to this. One of the minor sources listed on Wikipedia's stuff that allegedly proves Jesus Christ was real was a Samaritan historian named Thallus, who, according to an early Christian historian, Sextus Julius Africanus, wrote about the period of darkness that happened after Jesus' crucifixion. And the main reason why people look at him and say this is a good one is because apparently in that text he stated that it was that the period of darkness that happened after Jesus Christ's crucifixion was purely a solar eclipse and it had nothing to do with Jesus. That's what allegedly it says. Now, again, I keep saying allegedly because none of his writings survived. So literally, we're going off of a historian who wrote a piece about another historian who wrote another piece about another historian who allegedly wrote something, we don't even know if that person connected the eclipse to the crucifixion. For all we know, they just wrote a thing about an eclipse that it just so happened to line up with the time period. Again, we don't know. Because again, it's like a reaction video to a reaction video to a reaction video to a reaction video. It's like there's so many hoops and letters that, again, missing links that just don't exist. Another main issue is sort of like the historical depiction of Jesus. Like, with the written historical stories, there is no image of Jesus Christ that was made during his lifetime. Most of the paintings of him are just images telling the story of the Bible, or just generic godly poses through the artist's interpretation. I mean, the oldest image of Jesus Christ was in 200 CE/AD, and it was art literally calling him a jackass and Christians stupid for following him. And very early Christian art seems to differ greatly about what is typically seen of Jesus Christ now. A painting exists of Jesus Christ healing a paralytic from the 3rd century, and it noticeably lacks the beard that we associate with Jesus Christ today. But the biggest contradiction that was done was the fact that Jesus Christ, despite him being born and raised in Palestine, is typically portrayed as a European-looking guy. Now, I know that there is some debate about certain ethnicities being depicted in the Middle East during early humanity. Look up the ancient Egyptian race controversy to understand what I mean. But this one has always been a little far-fetched. But why does the image of Jesus Christ as some white European even exist? There's apparently not even really an explanation or description of how he looked in the Bible. So why is this the version of him that we see? Well, that's when people started noticing paintings of a man named Caesar Borgia, who looked remarkably similar to depictions of Jesus from that time period. Now, Caesar was not only a prominent Italian deacon, but also was the bastard son of Pope Alexander VI, leading some to theorize that Caesar became the model of Jesus in order to push the idea that Christianity was a European religion, even some people claiming that he actually burned all the art depicting Jesus as anything that contradicted this new image, so, people could not have, people wouldn't question, why do the Europeans take this Jesus Christ thing to be a big thing? And some even theorize that this might have been done earlier during the Crusades because the papacy was fighting the Semitic peoples. So having their own Lord and Savior be depicted as a Semitic person would lead to some mixed signals, humanizing the enemy. So how do you fix that? The only thing that might possibly throw a wrench in that theory is the famous 6th century painting Christ Pantocrator, which does look similar to the modern depictions of Jesus, but you have to admit, it's not quite the same. It's not one-to-one. You can definitely see that this depiction, that depiction of Jesus is a little bit more different than, especially since, as the years have gone on, it's gotten way more anglicized. And there is technically, there is a statement that says that that particular painting was painted over during the time of the Crusades, but there's no evidence that repainting led to a massive change. It's not like we if we wipe off a couple layers, it's gonna be brown, but as far as I'm aware. Now that's stuff I kind of knew. I kind of had to brush up on it a little bit to get a bit of a clearer picture, just to do a little bit more added bonuses to that. My main thing is if he's this prominent historical figure, shouldn't there be some consensus about what he looks like? Now I know this is probably not the strongest evidence of whatever, but I'm just including it because it's a big thing, especially considering the Caesar arguments, because the Caesar Borgiana arguments. I'm including that because that is a bit more the fact that it's that guy that looks remarkably similar to the historical depiction of Jesus is a bit but yeah, we also have to accept naturally back in the day, as further time back we go, we kind of have to take some creative liberties on how certain historical figures are depicted. Washington didn't exactly look like that when he was in his paintings. And, there's a lot of famous people who have posthumous, like, paintings of their likenesses that are very much clearly not, like, or I wouldn't say not, like, necessarily not like them, but, like, people like, is this really what they looked like? I'm not so sure. Like Shakespeare, Genghis Khan, and Columbus. But I'm just including, like, those two prior things, like, examples. But, like, nobody really particularly cites, like, the Bible or paintings that prove that Jesus Christ is real. At least not reputable people. And even a lot of historians kind of, like, generally, it's not that they don't, like, interact with Christian sources at all, but Christian sources are kind of seen as, like, we'll put those on a layer under them. Like, me personally, I do kind of, like, I didn't really engage a lot with, like, Christian sources, because it's gotta be real, bit of a vested interest in that one, in pushing that religion and pushing their goals in that regard. When I last talked about this perspective, when I talked about this, like, theory, I only brought up, like, the two sources that, like, most historians generally 100% reliably, like, rely on as, like, a crux for proof that Jesus Christ might have existed. And for the sake of it, I also include, like, a smaller source, because that particular one, it's not that big, but it's just, like, I just wanted to include because it's, it did make me go, like, huh, interesting. It made me okay, but, like, let's just get into it. The first source, which is kind of like the most famous source, seemingly, is a source from a Jewish Roman historian named Flavius Josephus. He wrote a 20-volume history series called Antiquities of the Jews in 93 CE that gave a historical breakdown of the crucifixion of Jesus. Specifically, it's mentioned in Book 18. The fact that he is both Jewish and Roman, adds credibility, like, the fact that he, of all people, is, saying Jesus Christ was real and this historical event happened, interesting. However, there's one major issue that stems from this particular source. And let's read it and let's see if we can figure out what's the problem with this source. Okay. About this time, there lived Jesus, a wise man, if indeed one ought to call him a man. For he was one who performed surprising deeds and was a teacher of such people as accept the truth gladly. He won over many Jews and many of the Greeks. He was the Messiah, and when, upon the accusation of the principal men among us, Pilate had condemned him to a cross, those who had first come to love him did not cease. He appeared to them spending a third day restored to life. And for the prophets of God had foretold these things and 1,000 other marvels about him, and the tribe of Christians so called after him, he still to this day had not disappeared. A pretty interesting diatribe, yeah. But, quick question. If Josephus was Jewish, why would he call Jesus Christ the Messiah? Why would he believe in the resurrection? If he was Jewish, why would he believe any of those things? And that led to the conclusion that these documents were more than likely tampered with to specifically have Josephus call Jesus Christ the Messiah. A lot of people try to say, well, okay, maybe the part where he calls Jesus Christ the Messiah wasn't like, maybe that was tampered with, but, like, the rest of the stuff is accurate. It's like, but how do I know? How do I know that? For all I know, this entire section was added. Ignoring the fact that the only historical source that we know he could have used to research that was more than likely the Bible. And there's another reason why him believing that Jesus Christ was the Messiah is a little bit inaccurate, but we're going to say that for a little bit later. Now let's move on to the second major historical, like, news source, or I guess not news source, historical source that quote-unquote proves Jesus Christ's existence, and it comes from a Roman historian called Tacitus. Tacitus also wrote a 16-volume historical series called Annals, which, paired with his earlier 14-volume one called Histories, was a, like, explanation of, like, the history of the world. Book 15 deals with the Jesus Christ crucifixion stuff. And let's read that section as well. But all human efforts, all the lavish gifts of the emperor, and the propitiations of the gods did not banish the sinister belief that the conflagration was the result of an order. Consequently, to get rid of the report, Nero fastened the guilt and inflicted the most exquisite tortures on a class hated for their abominations called Christians by the populace. Christus, for whom the name had its origin, suffered the extreme penalty during the reign of Tiberius at the hands of one of our procreators, Pontius Pilate, and a most mischievous superstition, thus, checked for the moment, again, broke not only in Judea, but the first of the evil, even in Rome, where all things hideous and shameful from every part of the world find their center and become popular. Accordingly, an arrest was first made of all people who pled guilty. Then, upon their information, an immense multitude was convicted, not so much of the crime of firing the city, as of hatred against mankind. Honestly, I think just reading that kind of gives you the biggest reason why that specific interpretation isn't reliable. Now, one thing is that historians actually say they make a weird note every time they talk about Tacitus, saying they don't know where he got his sources from. So again, it seems to heavily imply that the source that he got this from was the Bible. So again, a document that I do not believe is historically accurate. But again, even just reading that source, it's like pretty obvious that Tacitus had a hate boner for Christians. So clearly, the reason why he's saying all this is because he's trying to justify the persecution of Christianity that happened during the early Roman Empire. Like, to Tacitus's mind, they eradicated this dangerous cult leader who was doing evil things. So, that's basically what happened. Now, those sources I had already debunked a while ago, but one source that I kind of briefly made me think otherwise was a smaller source by a philosopher named Mara bar Serapion. Mara was imprisoned by the Romans after they overtook his city, and he wrote a letter to his son in 73 CE. The crux of the letter was basically that people who are smart usually get so oppressed, but his son should not let that deter him from pursuing wisdom, because Mara is basically saying, even when the smart people get fucked over, it usually doesn't work out so well for the people who fuck them over. Because, let's read it. For what benefit did the Athenians obtain by putting Socrates to death, seeing that they received as retribution for it famine and pestilence? Or the people of Samos by the burning of Pythagoras, seeing that in 1 hour the whole of their country was covered with sand? Or the Jews by murdering their wise king, seeing that from that very time their kingdom was driven away from them? The fact that this was a private letter and not a public thing, and the fact that it came from a guy so minuscule that literally this is all we know him for, adds a little slight credence. Not much, but a little slight credence, especially considering there's a reference to quote-unquote our gods in the book, which leads to many historians to debate whether or not he was a pagan, but some go he might be referencing the polytheistic nature of his town, not necessarily that he himself is polytheistic. Again, I don't know if it adds much, but it did make me go interesting. But this does lead me to moving on to the next part of this subject, and that is the pagan influence of Christianity. This is another thing that I've known for a bit. It's kind of prevalent, but in doing research for this episode, it's only become way more obvious by the fact that Christianity is very heavily influenced by various pagan beliefs prior. Judaism was probably the obvious template, or I guess maybe the precursor religion Yahwehism, but then over the course of its inception and in its history afterwards, it seems that it has gotten influenced by more and more pagan beliefs. The biggest one that I knew a lot about prior is the one thing that inspired this video being released this week. Christmas. This holiday is allegedly regarded by many as the birthday of Jesus Christ, when that is literally just not true at all. For a long time, Christians didn't even give a shit about the day he was born. Seems they also didn't even care about the year he was born, because apparently, when doing research, it turns out that the calendar that we use that is literally based on Jesus' birth is fucking wrong. Turns out that he was way more likely born 4 to 6 years earlier before Christ. Such a prominent historical figure, and yet we don't even know the year he was fucking born. But back to the day itself, that's also just not literally, early Christians didn't really celebrate the day he was born. Like, the earliest celebrations of Jesus' life was literally the day he was baptized. That was the original celebration that they had, because that was an important day in Christianity. That was the day he was given divinity. Or not necessarily given divinity, but more like, put him on the path to, religiosity, I think. It's an important day. He was baptized. That's an important day for Christians. And when Christians started actually, wanting to celebrate the birthday of Jesus, they chose a ton of different dates. August 28th, May 20th, April 20th, April 21st. But why did they settle on December 25th? Because in a lot of areas around the world, particularly the areas that Christianity were practiced, people of various religions were celebrating holidays commemorating the winter solstice. Areas like pagan areas. And Christians in that area just simply nailed Jesus to these holidays. The most famous example in this is the Roman holiday of Saturnalia. In fact, another Roman holiday celebrated around this time period was Dies Natalis Solis Invicti, or Day of the Invincible Sun, celebrating the sun god Sol Invictus's birthday, which was December 25th. It seems very interesting that this day that's supposed to be so important in Christianity wasn't even something that was officially, put together until much later in the religion's lifetime. And one of the things that I also decided to do for this video was not simply just, go on Wikipedia and look at the Wikipedia pages, but also I wanted to watch some documentary, because the Christ myth theory Wikipedia page has a couple of documentaries on it that talk about the Christ myth theory, or at least mention it. And I decided, screw it, I'm gonna watch them. I didn't watch them all. I didn't watch Religulous, because I tried to watch it a million years ago, but I just couldn't watch it. I might make it a Patreon video if you want. But I basically decided to look at these documentaries and see, do these guys make a good case for Christianity and, that kind of stuff? Do they make the case of, the Christ myth theory's validity? And the first one I decided to watch was Zeitgeist Part 1, mostly because I figured that this particular film wouldn't be the best arguers for that case. Because the Zeitgeist film series is kind of a generic conspiracy, documentary series that goes over, a ton of different documentaries. The Zeitgeist movie has, multiple parts. The first movie of Zeitgeist has, multiple parts in and of itself. And it deals with things like the 9/11 conspiracism, the Federal Reserve, a New World Order. The Jesus Christ part was kind of just the first section of it. And while it does add some new information or expands on some pre-existing stuff that I knew prior, it's very similar to Loose Change, where they put things that are 100% true, and then mix it in with some half-truths, and then sometimes they add a thing that's just that's just not true, and it just kind of pushes you down a path that's a little bit it's a little bit rocky and shaky. And one of the things that happens in it is the comparisons between Jesus Christ and Horus, the Egyptian god, which is a meme that I've seen quite a bit. Most people kind of heard, there are some comparisons between Horus and Jesus, and some atheist circles kind of, go one step further and basically say, it's just Control-C, Control-V for Horus, and this documentary kind of says the same thing, but that's not technically true. The idea of Horus being one being that can also merge with another being to become a more powerful being is sort of similar to Christianity's Holy Trinity, but it's not quite the same. Horus and his mythology involving dying and rebirth is similar to the death and resurrection of Jesus, but it's not quite the same. And while Horus was a miracle birth, he wasn't a virgin birth. The miracle part was because Horus's mom ripped off his dad's penis and then put a dildo in its place, and then he was born from the dildo. Like, yeah, it's not exactly the same as Jesus. And while the film Zeitgeist lies about Horus being born on December 25th, it ironically doesn't mention Sol Invictus, if I remember correctly. I think it might, because, because the way the film is kind of structured and sort of its other theses, it probably would have made his case better, considering one of the biggest perspective shifts was showing his perspective on, the Christian cross. You ever notice how in a lot of art of the Christian cross, Jesus Christ has a glow around his head with a cross behind him that sort of one part is above him and the two parts are on the side? This documentary points out that that symbol might have been somewhat inspired by a zodiac symbol. The circle in the middle represents the sun, which is divided into the 4 seasons, and since Jesus is allegedly God, which is usually shorthanded to be represented by the sun, he is in the middle. The sun is in the middle, while the seasons of the earth are around him. And before you guys go in the comments, yes, also, also, he was crucified on a cross. Yeah, we know that. But, it's does the symbolism come from that interpretation, or is it sort of religious synchronism? This was already a popular symbol, so merging it with the symbol of Christianity being the cross, is that sort of the thing? I'll include a link in the description of a page of an atheist magazine that's a bit more critical of Zeitgeist, because, yeah, when you read that page, it's the Zeitgeist is a pretty loose in regards to a lot of its, interpretations. Again, I watched this one specifically because I knew this one was probably going to be the one that had the least amount of evidence and the least amount of, meat to the argument. But the magazine actually goes so far as to point out that they actually could have went further if they didn't, hyper-focus on, Horus being, a beat-for-beat copy of Jesus Christ. For example, bring up the fact that Horus's life in the Nile is very similar to the early life of Moses. Again, I knew this one was probably going to be the weakest one going in the subject, so that's why I watched it first. The next documentary I saw was a documentary called The Pagan Christ, based on a book by the same name, where a guy named Tom Harper goes over the various pagan influence of Jesus over the various religious figures, and sort of the political reasons why modern Christianity came around, comparing it and contrasting it to the political reasons why Christians were oppressed in the first place. Emperor Constantine shifting his religion to Christianity, and the formation of the First Council of Nicaea, which tried to get everybody on the same page, because early Christians, as I mentioned prior, were not exactly consistent. Heck, the modern day Christians ones aren't really that consistent either. But one of the interesting things about this documentary that really, it's gonna sound weird, but one of the things that kind of made me, take this documentary way more seriously, I felt the arguments in it were kind of, good enough, and had, a lot of meat to them that I either knew prior or, expanded on stuff that I knew prior. But the thing that kind of made me really go, wait, what? Was the fact that this documentary opens with Tom Harper explaining he's a Christian priest, but he was able to point out the many contradictions in the Bible and use his critical thinking skills to examine them and come to the conclusion that perhaps the book might not exactly be a biography, and he accepted the evidence that showed that Jesus Christ was more than likely an amalgam of various religious figures from various different religions. Now, he doesn't become an atheist because of this. He actually makes a strange case that this reinforces his faith, basically arguing that rather than seeing the Bible as a hard biography that excludes everybody who doesn't believe in it 100%, he now sees elements of his religion beyond the small grouping that he grew up with, seeing the real influences that inspired the thing that he has dedicated his life to. It's basically one piece of a larger puzzle, far from the interpretation of Justin Martyr, who said that any similarities that Christianity had with the things that predate it are actually the devil trying to trick you. And another thing that happened when I watched this movie was literally, while I was watching it, I actually genuinely started thinking, you know what? All those New Age religion shit makes sense to me. Like, you know the ones I'm talking about. Like, the ones that are like, you know, like the Christ Sophia or like spirit science shit. I mean, okay, it's not, maybe not specifically that, but like, you get my point. Like, you know how there's like this like New Age form of like religion where it's like they basically believe in every single religion. Like, you know, like it's inspired by like Buddhism and like Christianity and like it's basically inspired by the various different philosophies of various different religions. You know, maybe like people who like love the zodiac signs or whatever. I guess maybe it could be like the reintroduction of like paganism, you know, that kind of stuff. Like, you get my point. Like, there's like this new age like era of religions that kind of popping up, that either have been popping up or been popping up for a while now. But after seeing like after seeing that documentary and seeing the massive like full on like completely uncontradictory like examples of like pagans' influence on Christianity, it's just like I honestly don't get how you could walk out of that and then somehow not conclude that all religions are equal. Whether they be equally wrong or equally right is, I guess, up to individual interpretation, but either way, they're all equal. The next documentary I saw was The Hidden Story of Jesus, presented by a Christian theologian, Robert Beckford. The documentary sort of expands upon stuff that was in the pagan Christ, this one having a more of a focus on Eastern religions. It's not the sole thing, but it's like a big part of this documentary, especially because this documentary was got a mini-series. It comparing Krishna and Buddha's life stories to that of Jesus, that kind of stuff. But it also like does a lot of other stuff with that like story. Another thing that was interesting that set this documentary apart from the rest was that they had a very strange tinge of anti-Zionism thrown in there. Like, Beckford refers to Jesus Christ's homeland as Roman-occupied Palestine, and he travels to Israel during the documentary, where he encounters a lot of things that were very interesting. While interviewing an Israeli Christian, discussing the persecution that person feels for being in a multi-faith marriage, his neighbors start protesting across the street and loudly proclaim that they are praying for his death. And then also comes a moment where he is meeting with Palestinian farmers in the occupied West Bank who want to pick their olives, but the settlers and the IDF are threatening to kill them, and a humanitarian mission has to save them, with Beckford even going so far as to say that would be what Jesus does. Jesus would do the same if he were in this position. The documentary even goes so far as to explain how, like, there are even sections of, like, specific religious doctrines that are not specifically universal. Staying in Israel, he brings up how there's a prominent rabbi in Israel that openly calls Jesus history's greatest monster and a heretic because his story led to massive amounts of anti-Semitism because of the deicide accusation. And then he also brings up Jews for Jesus, who argue that Jesus is actually quite literally an extension of Judaism. Seems to be a pretty vast contradiction for both of these Jewish people to have vastly different beliefs. Although, granted, I also know that Jews for Jesus is also like a group that has various questions surrounding it, but also staying on the subject of that deicide accusation, that's one of the other things that Beckford talks about. You know, history's greatest untruth regarding the deicide accusations, bringing up how it has led to massive amounts of anti-Semitism. Like, that's undeniably true that happened. And yet also, while interviewing that Israeli Christian in that multi-faith marriage, the Israeli Christian tells Beckford about how their neighbors have literally said to him, "When we get into power, we will kill you like we killed your Jesus." Again, a pretty noticeable contradiction. Some people talking about it being the greatest untruth in history, and then other people literally intentionally jumping on that quote-unquote untruth. And that's another big thing that's kind of like really like raises an eyebrow to me, because like it's inconsistent history. Like, guys, did the Jews kill Jesus or not? Like, the book doesn't really say anything about that, and yet it seems that a lot of people seem to have that interpretation. Like, even people who, I mean, I know people who literally don't mean anything by it. They're not trying to be, like, anti-Semitic or anything. They're literally just saying it as if it's just, like, a fact of history. And I'm just saying, you know, there isn't that much historical debate on who killed, like, Archduke Franz Ferdinand. And Archduke Franz Ferdinand is real. If this were, like, cut and dry, couldn't people just, like, you know, pick up a history book and, like, see the truth of who killed him? Another example of, like, religious divergence is how certain sects of Islam think of Jesus. The mainstream view in Islam is that Jesus wasn't crucified, but a clone of him was, and he is currently in heaven waiting to return, kill the Antichrist, and then afterwards, he will live a long and happy life and be buried with Muhammad. Meanwhile, in the Ahmadiyya section of Islam, they argue that Jesus Christ escaped crucifixion, lived a long and happy life in Kashmir, and is currently buried in the Rawza. Another element that gets controversial is when Beckford talks about the Nag Hammadi library, which he says are the most important discoveries in early Christianity, more important than the Dead Sea Scrolls, particularly because it tells a vastly different story of Jesus and salvation than anything that Peter said, with Beckford coming to the conclusion that the story of Jesus is basically irrelevant. It's more about the morals that come from the teachings and putting them into action, bringing up how people like Gandhi are more like Jesus than people who proselytize every Sunday. Now again, that's another thing I just want to mention. Those were two documentaries made by Christians making documentaries disproving Jesus' existence. And not gonna lie, those two stories were starting to, like, win me over. And I planned to watch more documentaries, but I decided at one point, while browsing YouTube, just like, you know what? Let me just watch, like, a couple of things on YouTube. Like, I mean, I don't think there are any documentaries particularly, like, debunking the Christ myth theory, but I decided I'm just gonna watch, like, a couple of, videos here and there to kind of, like, at least throw in, like, a couple of people arguing the opposite. And the two sources that I found were, one was an interview with a New Testament scholar named Bart Ehrman, and the other one was the Christ myth theory video by Useful Charts, who has a PhD in religious studies and used Ehrman's book on the subject as a stepping stone in his video. Neither of them are Christians, so there's no bias in that angle. The major contention in the interview was the question of Jesus' brother, with Ehrman even joking, like, if Jesus wasn't real, wouldn't his brother know that? And, that's like a thing that's like, okay, well, that might be something. But then the Useful Church video actually mentions the possibility of a slight misstatement in the brother of Jesus. Because, basically, like, Paul referenced the brother of Jesus, but there's also, like, the possibility that that's a mistranslation, and it's actually meant to be brother in Christ, not brother of Christ, I guess. The Useful Charts video was, like, at least trying to be somewhat fair, like, trying to make, basically, the video was, like, he makes the case, and then, like, debunks the case, bringing up, like, some elements of, like, the, like, theory that he's read online, or, like, read through the books. And one of the things that he brought up was, like, something called the Rank-Raglan methotype, which is a 22-point scale that people use for figures that are not definitively proven to be true to judge the possibility of whether or not they're real or they're fake. Like, there are some early historical figures that maybe history might be mythological. They're kind of, like, prevalent in both, but he's like, this is the thing that we would use to kind of, like, at least show which one do they lean more towards. And just for the fun of it, I decided to look over each of these ones and individually, like, go through each of these ones and just kind of go, okay, is this right or is this wrong? Although this specific part of this section, I kind of was watching another documentary. I wrote the Useful Charts, like, section first, and then also, like came back to it and then wrote, like, this section just because I thought it'd be fun. I thought it'd be fun to go over these 22 points and just see my personal interpretation of how it seems like this would be. Okay. Point 1, Mother is a royal virgin. Mary is not a royal, but she is a virgin, so I'll just give this point to him. Father is a king, his father is God, God is considered the king, so yes. Their father is often a near relative to the mother. Aren't we all God's children? So, yes. Unusual conception? Jesus Christ was born of a virgin, so yes. The hero is reputed to be the son of God? Definitely yes. Attempts to kill the hero as an infant, often by a father or maternal grandfather? King Herod tried to kill Jesus, so yes. 7. Hero is spirited away as a child? I don't think so. But apparently some random blog I saw trying to debunk this theory actually gave this point to Jesus. And while watching the other documentary, they also gave this point to him, so am I just missing something? I think I'm just missing something. Reared by foster parents in a far country? Not quite. Joseph and Mary did move to another place, did move to another country, but wouldn't necessarily be foster parents. Mary is his mother. No details of childhood. I wouldn't say there's no details of his childhood, but there's very little details of his childhood. Returns or goes to the future kingdom. Yes, his land of Jerusalem. Is victor over a king, giant, dragon, or wild beast? Not that I'm aware of. Marries a princess, often a daughter of a predecessor. Most claim that he did not get married, but even in the claims that he did get married, none of them were to the princess. Becomes king, king of the Jews. For a time he reigns uneventfully, kind of. He prescribes laws. He prescribes the laws of Christianity and Judaism. Loses favor with God or his subjects. Yes, he loses favor with some of the people. Driven away from the throne of the city. Driven away by the Romans and the claim that he is the king. Meets with a mysterious death. I wouldn't necessarily call the crucifixion mysterious. Often at the top of a hill. It's apparently at the top of a hill. His children, if any, do not succeed him. I mean, technically, yes, because it says a caveat, if any, he did not have children, so he did not have anybody to succeed him, so yeah. His body is not buried. It was buried, but then it rose, and his body disappeared. So, yes and no? And has one or more holy sepulchres and tombs. The cave counts, right? And there's the grave in Kashmir. And in Islam, they have a grave ready for him. So yeah, from my personal rankings of this, it puts him at around 16 to 17 points. But some have even gone so high as to give him 20 points. Even Useful Charts does as well. I mean, again, I could be missing something. I guess feel free to go in the comment section and give me your personal things of Jesus Christ ranking on this scale. But I should also mention, just because Jesus Christ gets a high number or a low number does not automatically mean that he's real or fake. It's just it's kind of like giving you the idea, if someone is higher, then there's you should probably get more evidence of them being real to back up the claim. But some of the arguments that he was also making, Useful Charts was making in the video, kind of felt a little weird. Where he points out how there are a lot of historical figures that are mythicized, but it rarely happens the other way around. But in doing so, he brings up King Arthur as an example, a figure who was at one point considered a 100% real person in history, before people and most historians kind of accepted that he's more than likely a myth. But Useful Chart says, well, but King Arthur's probably based on a real person. It's I mean, I guess you have more faith in that assumption than the historical community? It seems this is a bit weird. Just using him as an example is kind of weird. Also stating that this would be the equivalent of if Mormons believed the angel that talked to John Smith was real. I mean, which they do? Huh? Even bringing up how he argues that Paul clearly had to believe that Jesus Christ was a real person and not a mythical being. And I'm sitting there watching that part, I'm just I mean, I guess. I mean, I mean, I would assume that, I'm not gonna, I guess I can't, necessarily, speak for every single Christian, but I'm gonna assume at least some of you believe the story, right? I know, I just pointed out 2 Christians that don't believe that Jesus Christ was real, but, I'm gonna take a while, I guess, to assume that at least a decent number of you think he's real. So, I mean, who's to say that Paul, who's to say Paul's not a true believer, I guess? What if this guy who claimed to be Jesus' brother, what if he was lying? He's just hey, I can get this fucking loser Paul to say anything. And it seems like his arguments just kind of really didn't, click. His arguments didn't really click. It was his arguments really seemed to be more I guess basing it on assumptions. How he says, to believe in the Christ myth theory, you have to believe in this assumption, and this assumption, and this assumption. It's but it seems like the way you're describing it, it's you're believing in different assumptions. And I was just watching that, I'm just he's not making any arguments really against the theory itself. It really seems it really just seems weird. It seemed weird to me. And that's because it seems that he was focusing his argument specifically on a specific person's interpretation of the Christ myth theory, that person being historian Richard Carrier. Now, I can't exactly blame him. Richard Carrier is one of the loudest voices in the Christ myth theory movement, but I guess that just means that I don't vibe with Carrier's specific interpretation of the theory? And for those who don't know, and I didn't know, I guess, initially before watching that particular video, Richard Carrier's specific interpretation of the Christ myth theory was that the original Jesus story was written specifically to be an angelic extraterrestrial, and that the intention of the writing was that it all happened in a cosmic realm. Now, I don't know if he means the original writers meant it to be an allegorical thing, or if he means they wrote it to literally be in a cosmic realm. I guess basically he believes, Carrier says that all of the events of the Jesus Christ mythos were supposed to have always taken place in heaven, and they were never supposed to have taken place on earth. And Useful Chart's rebuttals were more well, that doesn't make any sense. Then why would Jesus Christ, why would he have blood? Gods don't normally have blood. To which I'm not sure if that's true. I guess you could, find, I would assume that there's, at least one story of, a god from, ancient times that bled at one point. But, that just seems, a little too simplistic to me. Again, kind of, I don't know if, because, again, I haven't read, Carrier's books, and I haven't really, delved into, Carrier specifically in regards to this theory. But if, it just seems to ignore all of this other, actual logical stuff, and instead focusing on, just, this other, this all end-all be-all thing, no, never mind. I guess I can't really go on. This and, some elements of it that I got in another documentary didn't really fill me with enough hope on this specific argument. And speaking of, the next documentary that I decided to watch was called The God That Wasn't There, which is the documentary that relies a lot on Richard Carrier. It's not his documentary, but he's very prevalent in it. The one thing that I really thought was cool about the documentary was the fact that the director, Brian Fleming, stole footage from Passion of the Christ and just blatantly did so. Literally, on the screen, it literally says, footage stolen without permission, and it, includes a copyright symbol and, the studio who owned it. And the reason why is because Fleming is also a copyleft advocate. Based, my fellow copyleft advocates. Let's go, gang. But otherwise, I'll be honest, the film was kind of lacking. It isn't nothing. It touches on Carrier's theory a bit, interviews him and a couple of other people like the Center of Inquiry's Robert Price, anthropologist Alan Dundes, and Sam Harris, touches on the gaps of knowledge between Jesus' alleged death and then the Gospels, but then it's sort of transitioned into sort of a critique of Christian fundamentalism broadly, and Fleming's personal relationship with it, which is fine, but it's not really what I came here for. Maybe it's the new atheist style of debate that wasn't the best. Maybe it's because the previous documentaries were British and this is an American documentary. Or maybe since this is just since the focus of the Jesus mythos theory was really focused purely on Carrier's idea, I kind of felt that this one was kind of lacking. And in doing research on some other things, I do kind of see how all those interpretations can kind of happen and kind of be brought up. Specifically because of a thing that I learned that is just an interesting story in and of itself. It was something called the Jesus Project, a plan by a historian named R. Joseph Hoffman, which was to bring together 50 experts in various fields related to subjects regarding, Jesus and history, and it was basically kind of the start of another historical quest for Jesus, and it was supposed to go on from 2007 to 2012. Now, there are a lot of elements that made this one specifically kind of an interesting development, not just due to the fact that it was, relatively close to the modern time. I guess it is modern time, but, it was 2012, that's a little bit that's not that long ago. Was also the fact that Hoffman was a Marcionist, which is a subsection of early Christianity that believes that there are two gods, the evil Hebrew god Yahweh, and the happy benevolent God that birthed Jesus, which received decent amounts of funding from the Center of Inquiry, and even had mythicists invited to be part of the project, including Richard Carrier, Robert Price, and Frank Zindler. Seems like the most interesting and actually, good, way to, do this kind of, project. What could possibly go wrong? Well, according to Hoffman, there were two major concerns that forced the project to be shelved. One was media hype. When the project was announced, it was in the headlines all over, historians to debate Jesus Christ's existence, which really overhyped and sensationalized the project, to the point where the only conclusion that would have really been worth the hype would be definitive proof that Jesus Christ wasn't real. But the other one involved the fact that some of the mythicists that were involved wanted there to be a specific subsection of the project for those that were committed to the Christ myth theory, which literally defeats the entire purpose of this project, and shows a complete lack of intellectual honesty on the subject. But guys, I've been an atheist for a long period of time. You think I don't know that we're kind of cringy sometimes? I know, guys, come on. I know. You guys know I know. But let's move on to the last documentary that I saw on the subject, which was called Caesar's Messiah, The Roman Conspiracy to Invent Jesus, based on the book by the same name by Joseph Antwell. You could probably take a wild guess to the angle that this one went for. As the title suggests, the idea behind this documentary is that the Roman leaders, particularly of the Flavian dynasty, were the ones who actually invented Christianity. Why did they invent it? To control and oppress people, of course. And apparently, one of the co-conspirators in this theory was Flavius Josephus, who was kidnapped by the Flavians before later earning their good graces by claiming that Vespasian was actually the Messiah in Judaism and became a trusted advisor to them. So yeah, remind me again how Josephus actually claimed that Jesus Christ was the Messiah again? If he already wrote that, because I had to check this. It's yeah, that's true. He did claim that Vespasian was the Messiah in Judaism. So if we take that at face value, then why would he also claim that Jesus Christ was the Messiah? Again, that document obviously was tampered with. And the idea was because of the contrasting elements of Roman society and Jewish society. Jewish society, prayed to God in a way that, people in the modern day would probably understand. Or I guess it was more of a private ceremonies, stuff like that. Meanwhile, the Romans, of course, they worshipped their emperors as if their emperors were gods. They had statues of all the emperors everywhere, which would probably contradict people who believed that God is the one superior being, and that no one on earth can really match up to that level, which made Jewish people harder to control during that time period. So, the alleged idea was that they were trying to convince Jewish people of the time that their Messiah had come and that the text would prove it by putting a mix of allegorical interpretations of Roman battles, remixed ideas of Roman and Jewish beliefs, such as titles in those older religions like Pontifex Maximus, and respecting Roman law. This theory also explains why there's an anti-Semitic interpretation of the Bible blaming Jews for the death of Jesus and not the Romans, basically claiming that the good ones would be the ones who follow their king, and the bad ones were the ones who killed him. Meanwhile, Jesus says of the Romans, "Father, forgive him," basically writing it so that it's like Jews of the era are forced to either join up with this big trend and this big religion, or face repercussions for continuing to defy the Roman rule by not revering the emperor. But wait, how does making up Jesus also lead to them revering the emperor? Because first of all, the idea is, first you create the Jewish Messiah, i.e. Jesus. You create him, and then you make it so that they revere him. But then, you add some elements that sort of imply that the second coming of Jesus, or the Son of Man, is in fact actually the Flavian family, because allegedly the things that were foretold would happen when, quote-unquote, the Son of Man returned were things that the the future Flavian Emperor Titus would do during his military career, basically setting him up to be the thing that would be revered by whoever would follow this new religion that would arise, which would continue with the rise of the Roman Catholic Church and the Holy Roman Empire. And it does explain why the Roman Empire drastically I guess I can't really say drastically, I don't really know the full timetable of it, but shifted from, the Roman religion to the Christian religion. But the one contradiction I had when looking into this documentary, when watching this, was this is the thing I kept thinking, okay, but what about the persecution of Christians that happened under Roman rule that Tacitus wrote about? Well, the career of Tacitus happened to overlap with the reign of the last Flavian emperor, Domitian, with this specific theory going on to state that what we perceive today as Roman oppression of Christianity was in fact simply targeting the Gnostics, because the Gnostics were the ones that had the more allegorical interpretation of Christianity, as opposed to the literalists, who literally believed that Jesus Christ was real and must be worshipped, and that people must preach his word. While the film itself is fine, it's a pretty well put together documentary, and I guess as I mentioned, it can kind of add some things. I'm just like, okay, I kind of see what this is saying. It adds some things that, okay, it adds more pieces to the puzzle, I guess. I should mention one fun fact that probably throws more wrenches in this field particularly. You see, apparently, Joseph Atwell is not well liked by the mythicist crowd at all. Robert Price, responding that the original book that this is based on was quote, the most outrageous display of parallelomania that I've ever seen. Parallelomania is basically when you notice patterns and make very bold claims about it with little historical basis. Even Richard Carrier doesn't fuck with Atwell's specific reading of certain things, literally writing a scathing critique of not just his book, but Atwell himself, stating, Joseph Atwell is one of those crank mythers I often get conflated with. Mythicists like him make the job of serious scholars like me so much harder because people see, hear, or read them and think their nonsense is what mythicism is. So it seems that this one is a little bit similar to Zeitgeist. Some things seem to be accurate, there's some stretching and half-truths that seem to unfortunately also be there. So I guess when you do research into these subjects, I'd recommend, doing further research than just these documentaries. Always top recommendation. Do your own research. Feel free to engage with more sources. maybe watch Religulous. Maybe that one's pretty good. There's another documentary called Creating Christ, which is based on a book by James Valiant and Warren Fay, which was directed by the same people who made the Caesar's Messiah doc. Maybe that one adds more pieces to the puzzle. I'm sure there are tons of other documentaries out there, both randos on and off YouTube. Heck, maybe start reading some of these books that I keep mentioning in this section. But at this point, you guys are like over an hour in, almost 2 hours in, and you're probably sitting there waiting for the answer to the question. Is Jesus Christ real? Well, surprisingly, a 25-year-old YouTuber doesn't have the answer to that question. Not a single human being on this earth has this question. If they're honest with themselves. If they're a liar, they will tell you they have an answer. But if they actually don't, if you're honest with yourself, they won't have an answer. But if you were to rephrase that into a softer question of, okay, do you believe that Jesus Christ is/was real? I think, based on all the stuff that I've seen, I'd have to say no. And ultimately, here's why. I cannot look at all of these comparisons between the life of Jesus and the lives and stories of all these other mythical and historical figures prior, not just the fairy tale aspects, but also the real aspects of his alleged life, like the day he was born, how he looked, how he was killed, and somehow conclude, oh, this part of the story that's based on old fairy tales is fake, but this one is real. What seems more likely, based on all the evidence that I've seen, is that the whole story is probably fabricated. That this story, like many religions after it, was created by people who didn't know how to explain the world and wanted a purpose, who were inspired by the beliefs that existed in the past, but remixed in a way that created what we know today as Christianity, and that would include the literal main character of the story, much like how I don't believe that Horus is real, nor Krishna, no Thor, nor do I believe that Jesus Christ is real. Now, am I like hardline 100% without a shadow of a doubt in the belief that Jesus Christ never existed? No, not at all. Much the same way I'm not like, 100% that God isn't real. There's like a slim chance, maybe, and depending on how far you're willing to go from the original thesis of who Jesus Christ is and was, then you could understand, yeah, maybe it's possible that there was a guy who espoused a religion that was against the mainstream beliefs at the time, was killed via a common execution method, and hey, maybe I'll even give you credit and say that he was named Jesus. But given that, combined with all of the other comparisons with many different other mythical saviors in various different religions, does make it seem a little less probable. And I'd like to think that I could be swayed if there was enough reasonable evidence to back up the claim, but we also have to acknowledge this section of this thing, and why, even if I'm 100% right and you're 100% wrong, this is kind of like I don't know how to phrase it, but like, this is kind of like a non-question, really. Because the truth of the matter is, I don't know if any threshold for me or you, if any of it, I don't think we're ever going to find that. Like, I don't think I will be upfront and admit that I'm not sure that my threshold of evidence that I need to be convinced of this will ever happen. We're never going to find the secret skeleton of Jesus. We're not going to find a secret birth certificate from the inn that's out there. We're not going to find Mary Magdalene's client list and see his number on the top of the list. Much in the same way, I doubt we're going to find a message from Paul that said, yo bro, I'm able to convince all these stupid people from Israel all this stupid bullshit about this guy named Jesus. They think he got his holes fingered by Thomas? That's crazy. If I can convince these fucking losers that he walked on water, I'll be able to steal all their money. Like, we're never going to see that. That's never going to happen. Like, literally, unless we get a time machine and invite every single human on Earth to travel to that exact time and place with the ability to understand the languages that are spoken of that time period, we're just not going to have that. I mean, I'd like to think that I'm also beyond the pettiness and biases that would come from, like, you know, espoused by Christians on the subject. But then we also have elements like the Jesus Project that were ruined by mythicists that refused to budge on the subject. I mean, during this video, I literally just said that I wasn't going to look at Paul's examples because, of course, he'd have a vested interest in proving Jesus is real. But I also included arguments of Christians saying that he wasn't real. Is that consistency or hypocritical? And I also acknowledge this, like, most of the arguments that I make against, you know, the Jesus Christ official narrative, for lack of a better term, you could easily turn that around and go against me. Like, Useful Charts did it. Useful Charts literally did it. He literally made the, like, he literally did the exact same thing. I looked at the arguments that he was making, and I'm just like, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't sound right to me. And it's just like, yeah, but, like, he probably would watch this video and hear the arguments I'm making and go, well, that doesn't sound right to me. It's like, yeah. Like, we're all working on the same old and rotting texts that barely cover the subject. Of course, arguments that are made on either side of this issue can be a little shaky. Like, I'm not gonna debate the subject for various reasons. And the prime one being that this topic doesn't really seem like it can be debated. Similar to religion broadly. Although, granted, that one, the latter one probably has, like, actually, you know, because it's, like, more of, like, a philosophy thing, I guess. But, like, this is, like, just, like debating, like, a historical fact, and a historical fact that just, it seems like either way can't be proven. Like, nor am I gonna get mad, like, of anybody who goes in the comments and be like, here's why the historical Jesus is real. Like, I mean, if you think you have an argument, I guess you could change your mind, if you could try, but you would also have to acknowledge, like, you have to go through all this stuff here, and then be like, will that threshold be reached? It's like, again, I don't think it will be, and that's, I wouldn't say that's fine, but it's just like, that's just the world we have. This was the position that I kind of held before, but apparently this is also the position of the man who has been dubbed the best mythicist, Robert Price. Because apparently, like, Robert Price is, like, the one mythicist who has all the credentials on the subject. Because it's one of the main criticisms that people who are, like, like, people who claim against mythicists, like, these people don't have the credentials of the subject, you know. It kind of seems like a little bit of, like, we're cool, we're, like, smart boys and you're, like, dumb, stupid boys, but, like, there can be some merit. There also probably can't be. Like, again, it's like, we got Robert Price, who's got all the credentials, and he makes his argument, so, you know. But the argument specifically is called Jesus agnosticism, and the biggest quote on that debate simply goes as follows. If there was a historical Jesus lying back on the gospel Christ, he can never be recovered. If there ever was a historical Jesus, there isn't one anymore. And yeah, that seems to be the bottom line. If there was a historical Jesus, he's been mythicized so much that the lines have blurred, that they've effectively kind of, like, in a way, disproved their own person's existence. Like, the story of Jesus Christ is from the myth. That's where the story comes from. There's no evidence that the story came from anything else. Yeah, the story could have been, like, a real thing that they added the myth on later, but there is no story that was written around that time period of that without the myth. Those two things are intrinsically linked. Like, it's already kind of hard to prove the existence of certain historical figures from that time period anyways, especially again because of, like, the mythicism that a lot of these way older historical figures get. The Jesus myth makes it way harder to do that. And as more time passes, it's just getting less and less likely that we can find it. Again, it's not like we're just going to go digging in the Middle East and we're going to find the hands with holes in them and, like, the, like, crown of thorns on his head. We're not going to find that. It's just not going to be there. So in an actual historical sense, this question is a nothing burger, really. This inevitably is just kind of more of an expansion of, like, the religion/atheism, like, philosophical question, unfortunately. Which does play a major role in a lot of the people who argue for this theory. One of the main reasons why I kind of, like, even like, give this discussion any attention. The fact that there is any doubt that this man, that over 2.4 billion people are dedicating their lives to, even existed. And again, like, if they believe in, like, this on their own free time, you could make a case, like, that's kind of, like, a little cringy, that's kind of a little weird, that's kind of a little, like, stupid, but that's not enough. They want it's not just that they want to believe in him, they want everyone else to believe in the story, too. They want the nation to force this belief on not just anyone who disagrees, but also children who can't think for themselves, who trust their authority figures blindly because that's all they know how to do, and to shut out any ability to even consider thinking anything else. You can't learn about this because it contradicts the thousands-year-old fairy tale. You can't do this. The thousands-year-old fairy tale says that it's an unforgivable no-no. The only thing you need to have a fulfilling life is Jesus Christ. Like, that doesn't happen for any other historical figure. Like, that doesn't happen for real people. You know that, right? People don't go, oh, all you need is right before you go to bed to say, "Dear George Washington, please give me all the ponies I want for Christmas. Thank you." Much in the same way people go, like, why do you talk about God so much if you don't believe in him? Why don't you talk about the Tooth Fairy? Yeah, because the tooth, like, nobody's going around going, you two consenting adults can't have sex because the Tooth Fairy says no. That doesn't happen. They say that about Jesus. They not just make the active choice to do this, but they make the active choice to blindly follow it no matter what. Making the choice to remain ignorant in the year 2025 is terrible. We have access to literally every piece of human knowledge in history. Why do you choose to remain ignorant? Why not choose to actually look at it? And these beliefs aren't just dumb. Like, I mean, everybody makes fun of Christians and stuff, like, Christians and every other religious person, like, oh, you're stupid, huh? Like, yeah, but if it was just dumb, harmless fun, nobody would give a shit. But it's not. It's dangerous, too. Convince a person that they're following the path of God, and they can convince themselves to do literally anything. I mean, literally. If you think that you're doing the ultimate something, if you're doing something for the greatest good out there, what's to stop you from doing something slightly less than moral if it ultimately serves the greater good? Worst case scenario, you get a last minute conversion and get into heaven. Best case scenario, God approves of what you do. That's why we have so many Christian conservative influencers that are perfectly content with just lying to people. That's why we have tons of fucking stupid trad Catholic accounts going like, Deus Vult, cosplaying like a crusader, because they legitimately just want to murder people who don't believe their stupid bullshit. It's just a meme, bro. Yeah, you say that, and then, Christians keep doing violence in the name of their phony baloney God. It's not just Christians, obviously, I gotta say it again. It's not just Christians, but you guys far eclipse every other religious group in violence and oppression, especially in America. The place that you argue is a Christian nation, despite the fact that the founders literally rejected the divinity of Jesus. And I guess I should say this because I know statistically there are a decent number of my subs who are probably Christians, and there's a chance that you might try to defend your religion's honor in the comments. I'm just gonna do you one step favor. If you're in this far before you've made the comment, don't. Just don't. Don't. I'm not in the mood to hear it. I'm not in the fucking mood to hear it. I'm not in the mood to hear, these guys aren't real Christians. A real Christian would do this and not that. According to the Bible, actually, blah, blah, blah. I'm not in the mood for that. Really? Out of the 2.4 billion Christians on this earth, all of them are reading the book of God wrong, except for you? You're the one who managed to get it right? You ever start to consider that maybe you're reading it wrong? Like, it's just broadly the same with every other religion. Like, oh, you see, every other religion is wrong except for mine. Like, I mean, I read this specific interpretation of this specific religious text from like 13,000 years ago. I got it right. Everyone else, they got it wrong. Well, this specific religious group that basically agrees with everything I say except for this one thing, they got it wrong. Like, really? Really? Methinks that you're just doing the same thing that every single, religious fundamentalist, reactionary does. You use your religion as a crux for beliefs that you already hold. If the word of God was so plainly, obviously there, Why would there be so many Christians or other religious people of vastly different beliefs in regards to philosophy and politics? Moreover, why would there be various schools of thoughts regarding Christianity? Much in the same way not every single person on the political left is in 100% agreement in regards to Marxism, or whatever, MLs, Leninists, Stalinists, Marxist, Leninist, Maoists, that kind of stuff. You ever stop to consider that maybe you're all actually, not, the whole thing is like a book that is literally meant to be up to interpretation? If you accept that, and maybe that is an actual conversation that could be had, treat the Bible as a storybook, or heck, if I'm being generous, treat it as a philosophy book. But clinging onto it as anything more to me is just insane. This has to end. People need to wake the fuck up. To quote Dark Matter 2525, believer, I don't talk about God because I know he exists. I talk about God because I know you exist. And it seems that simply giving Christians an inch on this subject allows them to take a mile. The only option is to combat Christianity in the battle of ideas in the same way many thinkers have done in the past. And nipping it at the top is way too little. We need to go to the root of it. Expose the truth of Christianity's origins, show that even the most fundamental level, it's all based on a lie. You have an infallible God, and yet somehow he seems to borrow his, all these stories to tell the story of his son? What seems more likely? That Jesus just so happens to have copied all these stories from all these other different religious things? Or that perhaps that actual story was created specifically because of all those things? For lack of a better term, God and Jesus have to die. Some worry about what world will arise after that. Remember the Nietzsche quote, "How shall we comfort ourselves, the murderers of all murderers? What was holiest and mightiest of all that the world has yet owed has bled to death under our knives. Who will wipe this blood off of us? What water is there to clean ourselves? What festivals of atonement, what sacred games shall we invent? Is not the greatest of this deed too great for us? Must we ourselves not become gods simply to appear worthy of it? You worry, but I have lived in a nation governed by people who have claimed to be the most fundamentalist, religious people of the world. Not just the world, but ever. Literally, of the state, of the nation, of the world. And that they do the things that they do because Jesus told them to. And all I've seen is this so-called Jesus telling them to slaughter innocents in Iraq, slaughter innocents in Syria, slaughter innocents in his homeland of Palestine. This so-called Jesus tells them to make the poorest in this country starve while allowing the richest to reap the benefits. This so-called Jesus sat idly by while one of them was buddy-buddy with a child sex trafficker, let 400,000 people die, tried to murder multiple politicians, and rewarded him with a slight head turn and another chance to hurt more people. This so-called Jesus tells them to take the most downtrodden people in this country and actively make things worse for them. There is literally no way that a world without this cancer can be anything but better than the world that exists. And the biggest reason why is because religion, to an extent, pacifies people. It really does pacify people. Unless you really want control and power, it pacifies you. Because you still kind of believe, don't worry, eventually things will work out when we get to heaven. Because we did the good things, right? Nobody believes that they did the bad things and go to hell. Nobody believes that. No matter what you've done in your life, you always believe that you're going to heaven. And that's one of the main reasons people just generally yeah, it doesn't matter if things are suck now. Things will get better in the afterlife. That's literally the viewpoint that Mother Teresa had. She literally felt like if you suffered greatly in the real world, then when you get to the afterlife, you're going to get rewarded heavily. Meanwhile, it's just why? Why are we focusing all of our attention on trying to get to this so-called afterlife? I guess it could be morbid, but if you really are so desperate to go to the afterlife, you can just go at any point you want. That's the one thing I've always wondered, Why is funeral sad to a religious person? Why is that sad to you? The person that you're mourning is now in the afterlife and they're being rewarded for all their goodness. Why are you sad? And, the obvious answer is you're sad because, you don't get to see them for a while. It's sad for me because the person is gone forever. They have ceased to be, and they will no longer come back. But, again, people are so focused on this so-called afterlife that's going to be so great for them that they don't focus on the here and now. To quote the song Glory Hallelujah, I know you're scared of dying, man, and I am too, but just pretending it's not happening isn't gonna see us through. If we accept that there's an end game and we haven't got much time, then in the here and now, we can try and do things right. I mean, seriously, why? Why are we... Because, again, people are now suffering. People now are miserable. People now are getting hurt. Why are we focusing again on this so-called afterlife that, maybe hypothetically when we get there, things will be better? How about instead of trying to find a stairway to heaven, we can build one down here? Anyways, that's all I have to say on that subject. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, and click the bell to notify if a future video of mine comes out. And if you want more content from me, consider supporting me on Patreon.